Wow, welcome back into the studio. Today I thought we'd do it a little different, and we're gonna do another installation of Technique Tuesday. And this time we're going to work with Chippies. Now, in my language, Chippies are chipboard die cuts. And as you probably already know, my favorite brand is Wow Studio. And this is not sponsored by them, but I'm very verbal about the my love for the Wow Studio Chippy. One, it's a small business, and I love to promote small businesses. So what I'm going to show you is kind of a variety of different ways that I like to use chipboard pieces. So sometimes they're focal, used as the focal point. Sometimes I embed them into a background. Really, they are wonderful for enhancing texture, and that is my go-to thing anyway. So let's get down onto the table, and I'm going to go through and show you some of my favorite ways to use chipboard pieces in your mixed media art. All right, so this is a piece of Wow Studio chipboard, and it's one of her backgrounds, and you will notice something about the Wow Studio chipboard. It has this singed area, and you can see it will rub off on you, and it'll rub off on your art if you don't wash it off. I happen to like this and choose not to clean it off. The singed look. I like the unexpected. I like the grunge that will happen. So to clean that off, all you need to do is just take a baby wipe and just rub off each of the edges. That's all you really need to do, is just go in and kind of clean it out. So with this, what I'm going to first show you is using something to enhance a background. And this is big. So what I'm actually going to do is cut it down. So I've pre-marked, I've laid it out on my page, and I've pre-marked where I want to cut for the first piece. And it's neat. She always sends these were little pieces that were inside here. And so you can leave them in and use it, take them out and use it separate. So these are just regular old crafting shears, and I'm just gonna snip along where I want it to be cut. And she uses really heavy chipboard, so sometimes it can be a little tricky. So I'm going to have enough chipboard here to be able to do this whole project, which I'm excited about. All right, so I'm going to put this to the side, and I'm going to do this, just do one of these just in case I want to use it. So this is the piece I'm going to use first off. And the first thing I'm going to show you is one of the ways I like to use embossing powder on chipboard. I have a couple methods of using embossing powder. This is just one of them. So I'm going to use it to kind of give it an overall difference in coloration. So it's specifically in color for that coloration. And I'm going to use the Tim Holtz Distress Powder embossing powder, and this is Antique Linen, and Seth Apter's Vintage Beeswax in the Baked Textures, and a Versamark stamp pad. I like this little one to use on embossing items on chipboard and stuff because it's small and I can get into crevices really nice and easy. So I'm going to give that a nice little coat. And I am going to come in with the Tim Holtz Distress Powder to begin with, because that is what I'm going to use to color this. And all the products I used today, I will have listed down below for you. There will be links. Those are affiliate links. And if you don't know what affiliate link is, you can read up all about it down below. Now for this, when you do embossing, I usually use just a hairdryer to dry my things because I like to have the option to do it at a cooler setting rather than scalding hot. But embossing powder does require that you use a actual heat tool. It needs to be hot to activate. Heat tool. And these are going to get pretty hot, so I like to use a pair of tweezers for this. And I haven't let this preheat up, so it's going to take a hot minute to get it up to temperature first. And you'll be able to see as it starts to heat up and activates that Distress embossing powder area there, it starts to go. So there is the distressed embossing powder. And now we're going to do this one. And now it's already heated up, so it should start to activate this quicker. There it goes. You can see it changing, so that's how you know that it has been heated enough. As you can see, it kind of gets a little baked on and glossy, almost like when you look at enamel, enameled tin pieces. Kind of gets that kind of a look to it. If it's not been done to the highest level, then you'll notice it will flake off when you touch it. All right, so that aside. So now I'm going to do the exact same thing again, but this time I'm going to use the vintage beeswax. And the reason for that is because I like the way it looks. I wanted to get this the right color. And the vintage beeswax, although has a slight hue to it, yellowing to it, I like the way that it looks on top of these distress powders. If you wanted it to look more glossy and thicker, then you could use something like the ultra thick embossing powder. But I love this vintage beeswax. And the Baked Textures has different particles in it as well as the distress powder did. And you can see some clear crystals in there. I'm sure you could see some of that. And it just has that slightest sheen to it, a little bit more of a yellow hue. This is still pretty hot. And now this can become part of a background. So that is one look that I like, is the way that these products work together. I choose not to emboss on the edges because I like the way that that gives it a shadow effect, especially when it's over a lighter colored area. So that is one embossing method that I like to use on chipboard. So next, I'm going to show you a second embossing method, but not for a background. This will be more of a focal. All right. So I have out a Paper Artsy Mini. This is a rubber stamp and it has a whole bunch of numbers on it. And this is a fun method. I have, this is one of Dee Catron Umwell Studios tabs. And I have a black embossing powder, my tray, and the Versamark. So what I'm going to do, more of a traditional method of embossing, I am going to put the Versamark right on the stamp. And I am going to use it on the chipboard piece. In a couple places. And then I'm going to put the embossing powder. This is just, like I said, a black. I don't really worry about the quality and how much stuck. This is really more of just a real distressed look. And you could use this as is, or you could go in with acrylic paint. You could go in with a Posca paint pen or some kind of acrylic paint pen. Those are options. What I'm going to do is, this is a Dina Wakley Glossy Spray. It has been taken out of the spray bottle because I don't have patience for the non-working spray bottle. So it will go to the bottom just like in the spray bottle, and I moved the little ball bearings over. I'm just going to give this a good shake, make sure it gets really mixed up. The nice thing about these is they are glossy, and they will go nicely with the embossing. I don't mind that. I don't mind the distressed look of it. And really the embossing is going to act as a resist. And I love how the chipboard shines through. This is, it still needs to dry, but this is such a fun look. And there you go. You have a wonderful little tab to be used. And you can do the exact same thing on the other side. Another thing I really love to do with chipboard pieces is to embed them in as texture. So these are not Wow Studio. They do have adhesive on the back, and I'm actually going to use the negative space because I find that it's just different and can really be kind of fun to use as a background. So I am going to use these in the background, and I'm going to use it and embed it in with this texture paste. This is a Ranger product. It's like TCW Light and Fluffy, but I find that it's just a tad different in the texture with it. I love TCW's Light and Fluffy. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this off, even though I'm not really going to be using it for adhesive, the adhesive qualities. So I am going to lay down some of this texture paste. One of the ways that it's different is it's thicker than the TCW Light and Fluffy. TCW's Light and Fluffy is really that light and fluffy. And one of the things I like about doing this process of using chipboard pieces as texture in a background is to just get it down and slap. Not being perfect about it and not being precise, and letting what's going to happen. So I'm just really slapping that texture paste down, and then I'm going to come in with my pieces and get them embedded. So I'm just going to press it down into the texture paste. This can be done with modeling paste. It would be a little bit heavy, but it could be done with TCW has stencil butter that could be done with that. Okay, that's good. I feel like it's made contact with the surface below. Now, one thing that you can do with the texture paste by Ranger, as well as the TCW paste, just a side note, is you can get your finger wet and you can smooth out some areas if you wanted to. And just get some areas that have a different texture than others. So we have some smooth, rounded areas now, and we have some crisp, highly textured areas as well. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I am going to let this dry naturally. I like how things work out if you let it dry naturally. So we're going to let this dry naturally. All right, so now this is dried, and you can see we have quite a lot of texture. So I wanted to also explain that the inspiration for this Technique Tuesday and talking about Chippies and how I use them came about from another iCAD. and that was from day 48, and the prompt was clock. And on here, similar to this, I used a similar technique. So I laid down the chipboard piece, and this is an Wow Studio piece, as well as the numbers. I laid those down, and then I added modeling paste to the card and just really brought it up and over and into different areas and crevices, and then I pushed the letters into it. Now on this, I used, trying to think of what I used. I believe that I used Distress sprays in Rusty Hinge, and it's probably espresso. And then I used some Finnabair wax with my finger and just went over the chippy with that wax. Now, I took advantage of the Wow Studio chipboard pieces being that they have the dark soot inside, and I played upon that on this one and used some Stabilo all around the circle and brought that dark into the center of some of these circles for some really high contrast. So Crafty Hope had wanted to know how I did this, and that gave me the inspiration to do this Technique Tuesday on how I use Chippies. So unlike that original, this one I'm going to do a little bit different. So I used texture paste, which is was the prompt for day 57, and which is today. And so I use that instead of modeling paste, and I use some unknown chippy pieces on this. So this time, instead of going in with Distress spray, I want a very different look. So I'm going to go back in again with these glossy sprays. This one's been converted into a squirt bottle, which is how I prefer to use them. This lemon is newer to me, and so it hasn't been converted yet. So I'll show you how I'll use it. So I need to get these shaken up. Now, I love this night. I love putting it down first and then coming in with a lighter color. So that's what I'm going to do. These take quite a bit of mixing to get all of that stuff off the bottom. And there's going to be a little bit of soaking up on the chipboard piece itself, and that's fine. It's to be expected. And I'm just going to move it around and get it in and over the texture. If I want it to move more, I'll just come in and add some water to it. Get some that's kind of less saturated in color. But you'll notice the chipboard will have soaked up a great deal, and the modeling paste, or excuse me, the texture paste won't do it as much. So I'm going to come in with a brush, a round brush on this, but I'm going to use a cheap brush because I don't like to put my good brushes in this because it's hard to get it totally off. And I'm just going to get my brush really saturated and just kind of glomp it on. Let it run where it wants to, do its thing. Kind of almost looks like Starry, Starry Night. And I just love how this liquid mediums go into all that texture and really catch it. Okay, and so this is the yellow and blue, of course, make green, and so we do have this alternate color coming through. If I'm not really thrilled with that, the mixing in those areas, I can come back in and kind of play with that a little bit and bring back some of that blue. But really, for the most part, I am really okay with that green. It's just part of the way it works. So as you can see, now that it's dry, we have very similar techniques with a few different nuances, different types of chipboard, different types of texture medium, and different color elements being added. And we can get a very different look with this. So that is another way I really enjoy using chipboard. I'd love to see what you're doing with chipboard. If you've gotten anything out of this Technique Tuesday, if you would please share it with me or give me a comment down below. I would love that. It's always wonderful to hear your feedback about the different techniques and things that I'm bringing to the channel.